Dear researchers and colleagues, thank you for attending this conference. I'm so excited to know you all and hear your presentations. Dear organizers, thank you for giving us this opportunity to be here and participate in this prestigious event. So, introducing myself, my name is Sanae Jillali. I'm a PhD student from the National School of Business and Management, Hassan First University of Settat, Morocco, and I'm here to communicate my first paper titled Financial Performance of Initial Public Offerings, Companies Listed on the Casablanca Stock Exchange, Exploratory Study. So I try to keep things short and succinct and go to the point. So the order of the presentation is as follows. First of all, I will be looking on an overview and background of the study. Then I will move into a literature review, then a description of my empirical framework based on international models of investigations, followed by the principal results and discussion of those studies, and finally, we will finish by looking at a general conclusion. Starting by an overview and the background of my research, I want to notice that my paper is a form of an exploratory study and a literature review in order to prepare the ground for research on the subject of financial performance of Moroccan listed firms following initial public offerings (IPO). So the IPO such as a strategic decision that affects company on several levels, particularly organizational and managerial, is a subject that preoccupies a multitude of researchers and specialists. Also, the subject of firms' performance remains always a concern to managers, notably for a developing country, namely Morocco. And as we know, the company faces a number of problems and challenges, among others, seek funding and ensure its liquidity. And it is true that corporate funding means have become diverse, but cost minimization and funding decisions have always been a concern for managers, besides the ultimate goal of ensuring sustainability and existence of the unit. And here, by referring to the survival of the organization and to ensure a competitive advantage, the organization basically needs to operate in its market and perform. Therefore, it is necessary to deal with this subject of firms' performance that has essentially chosen or chooses to finance itself through the market. Otherwise, the performance is not that simple when referring to certain areas, especially for especially the word of organizations. It is rather a complex with multiple dimensions concept. According to many authors, the determination and measurement of the performance always remain a slave to the aggregates and the variables chosen. It is subjective to the visions and objectives of the organization's stakeholders. On the other hand, the multifaceted nature of this notion of performance gives it a non-definitive meaning which differs from one context to another, which leads us to limit our field of investigation on in the financial dimension, considered more appropriate to the stock market context. Even it's according to some authors limited and early abandoned, but according to others, the financial dimension is or could be sufficient in some contexts. Now, moving to the literature review, as we expand the scope of the literature review on the financial performance of listed companies, we see a dialectical relationship between two main lines of thought fueling the great controversial debate on the advantages or consequences that a company can derive from its IPO. Here, authors that are authors who have devoted research to the period preceding the operation of opening up capital to investors to study the explanatory factors of such a decision as well as its advantages, which encourage the use of this mode of financing, and others which analyzed the evolution of performance after the IPO to validate a precise hypothesis that can justify the impact of the stock market listing on the performance of any firm. And here, what we are going to do is to combine both to get an idea about the general impact of the IPO event on the financial performance of companies going public. On the next slide, you have the scheme. So, the explanatory factors are the advantages or the main reasons why companies choose to finance themselves by the market, as getting another possibility of financing, strengthening the reputation of the company and its negotiating power vis-a-vis partners. For example, bank indebtedness since it is under considerably expensive conditions, so that the stock market grants liquidity and portfolio diversification through fundraising, or the determinant of satisfaction with standard means of financing, that is the factors that can discourage companies from resorting to capital markets, among others the costs of this operation of IPO. So for the companies who chooses to finance themselves through the capital market, they can benefit from its control and surveillance, especially with regard to the manager, by limiting his discretionary behavior and the phenomena related to the latter, that is information asymmetry and agency conflicts. Also, the listed company benefit from a continuous evaluation and valuation by experts of the stock market, which limits the possibility of making additional gains and profits in a discrete manner when the company loses its value. And in terms of performance, almost authors and researchers corroborating with the idea of the positive impact in a period pre-listing, but a negative one on the long run. So here, a super performance is seen before winning the race of IPO, and it is a strategy adopted by the managers to show an illusory image to investors by making of strong investments and other manipulation of performance. Also, when deciding to went public, companies can use the timing market to win the race, but after a moment of being listed, the performance deteriorates significantly. So, many authors try to explain through the timing hypothesis the degradation of long-term performance of companies issuing shares. Managers choose to issue shares in a period of over-evaluation of the company by the financial market, whose stock prices are high and based on informational asymmetries and the uncertainty of the environment. Shareholders find themselves in a position preventing them from knowing the true value of the company during its IPO. So they will focus on the good results recorded by the issuing company while neglecting the timing effect and the events of the so-called hot market period and favorable moments, which leads them to errors. Continuing with our third part of the presentation, which is empirical framework. So, the purpose of this thesis is to study and examine both from a theoretical and empirical point of view the difference in financial performance before and after initial public offerings in companies listed on the Casablanca Stock Exchange in Morocco. So, the exploration would be hybrid, which consists in combining the two approaches, theoretical and empirical. And we made the choice to position this work within a framework of a positivist epistemological paradigm. And in order to complete the results obtained, we plan to combine both quantitative and qualitative data in the same study, with sample size and generalizations and more details and depth. So, we will then be based on triangulation. It is about obtaining different but complementary data on the same subject in order to better understand the research problem. And in this case, our reasoning will be deductive because we are going to move from the general to the particular. By analyzing the subject in a general way, we will subsequently transpose it and put it in line with the situation and the Moroccan case. Based on international models, as you see, the period is between 1994 and 2020. We will carry out the study over a 5-year time horizon, which means 2 years before and 2 years after the IPO event. And we restrict our analysis to the sample of 52 firms for which we have complete data, and we feel like we have a representative population. About the performance metrics, we choose to work on the bottom line, and ROE stands for return on equity, accompanied by the operating income, since the net income is often misleading and doesn't take into account non-current events. And about data collection, so the data necessary for the conduct of the study are available and will be obtained from the prospectuses of the offers, financial statements, and documents, as well as the annual stock market reports of each company in the sample. Now, moving to results and discussion, we will discuss the international research findings by market. So, we have the first market, the American market. We have different investigations and empirical studies that affirmed the hypothesis of timing, agency, the assumption of earnings management, which is performance manipulation, and this based on different population size. About the period, as you see, it's usually about 1 year before and many years after the IPO event, except the study by Michelson and other authors. They ardent defenders of the theory of timing by taking a large post IPO interval, which means 1 year before and 10 years after the IPO event, using different aggregates and variables of performance. And also, we have Scheller and Anderson. Unlike industrial companies, they have confirmed that this type of company recorded performance is not judged in total decline after the IPO. So, for them, the return on assets and other financial indicators are rather increasing. About the Asian market, we have Giant Way that validate the timing hypothesis and reject that of the agency. On the South Korean market, we have Schoen and Smith, ardent defenders of the theory of timing. We have also Yan and Jai, confirmed the theory of timing. They found that neither the agency nor the control hypothesis can defend or explain the drop in performance after the IPO. We have also Kim and other authors that studied the performance on a Thai context. Also in Malaysia, we have Unici and his colleagues. They affirmed that Malaysian IPOs follow anarchy during this period, and actually their performances are not predictable by return determinants. This focusing on the duration that directly follows the event, the first day of listing, then the first week, and then the first month until the first year. Moving to the European market, we have different investigations. In an Italian context, we have Pagano, Panetta, and Zingales. They chooses the explanation based on underpricing and validate the timing hypothesis, which seemed adequate for them to the phenomenon of decline in stock market performance. Then we have the study by scientists in a French context that was compensated by the study of Serve. The later chooses the different aggregates and a large size of on his sample, and he highlighted the decline in economic performance of French companies. Also, we have two studies in the UK. The first one by Khurshid and other authors. They has proved that the alternative investment market (AIM) no longer affects the leverage of firms as other markets do. It rather gives the possibility of growth without affecting profitability after the IPO. And it has proven to be an adjustment tool that balances the capital structure of companies going public. And we have in the same line Kalkali and Haddad and Wood rebounded on the hypothesis of timing, taking a total sample of 590, of which 316 are companies backed by venture capital, unlike the 274 which remain. The specificity of their sample enabled them to prove an advantage of companies backed by venture capital. This taken into account the character of the study period. Is it hot or normal? And we have also the study by Pastosiak and his colleagues in a Poland context. They remedied the phenomenon of window dressing, which underlies that companies can raise more money than necessary for the investment strategy and show themselves to potential investors before the IPO. And now we're moving to the African market. So, in an African context, Wamboy Wamari, with example of 7 companies that went public between 2000 and 2006 on the Nairobi Securities Exchange, demonstrated a decline in financial performance, but not significantly. We have also in Tanzania Munisi. He was able to judge through his calculations the financial performance of his sample, a performance which was rather high considering the SA ratio. SA stands for sales on assets. And we have also Jomasi, Gon, and Wamba. They showed a generally improved financial performance after the IPO, based on a period of 5 years before and 5 years after IPO. And finally, a focus on the Moroccan stock market. We have the study by Kadori and the other authors, based on a sample of 18 SMEs, stands for small and medium enterprises, listed on the Casablanca Stock Exchange over the period 2000 and 2011. We're able to argue that listing has a negative and significant effect on performance, which declines over the years after IPO. We have also the study by Alami Talbi, by evaluating the financial performance of 25 companies meeting certain criteria and going public on the Casablanca Stock Exchange between 2005 and 2011, was able to judge the stock market performance of her sample over a window of 6 months before listing and 5 years later. And according to the methods followed, that is the event-based methods of evaluating short-run stock market performance and the long-term calendar methods. So here, by this study, it turns out a stock market underperformance in both periods, as well as a positive impact of size on this performance and a negative impact of the book ratio market. To sum up, many authors have dealt with the subject of changes in the financial performance of companies before and after the decision to go public. As already discussed in our article, such a decision is taken in the case of companies with high expectations, notoriety, liquidity, diversification, bargaining power, etc. It can also be favorable at the organizational level in the control and supervision of companies, and more particularly with regard to the manager, by limiting his discriminatory behavior and the phenomena related to the latter, among others, information asymmetry and agency conflicts. The financial performance is in some cases impacted by the IPO and in a pre and post listing period over a temporal process. There is a melting pot of which several other elements can impact its evolution, such as the size, the level of indebtedness, the culture or perception of the leader, demonstrated by several international authors. So it was a big pleasure to talk to you today, and I hope this has been informative and useful for you, and would like to thank you all for your attention. Thank you.